Welcome to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, where we explore leadership principles through the lens of the beautiful game.
Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and with me is my brother, my co-host, Paul Jobson. Paul, how you doing, man?
Phil, I'm doing great. This is an awesome day to be recording. We're recording on Eclipse Day. I don't know what the official name of today is, but as part of the Waco weather report, I have to report we are sitting in the perfect spot to see the total full eclipse. We'll be completely dark for 4 entire minutes during the middle of the day today in Waco, Texas. So I'm actually probably coming across more excited than I actually really am about it. But it is kind of cool to know that, okay, we're going to see a total eclipse, and where we are is probably the best place to see it. So we're probably spoiled with that, but we are excited about that. We're big reports of like hundreds of thousands of people were going to flock to Waco, Texas. I'm not sure that actually happened or not.
Okay.
But it's all the same. So, but yeah, that's what's going on today, man. Big day in the Waco world, and the world
is pretty amazing
as we know it.
Do you have the solar eclipse glasses, the ISO
of course
official glasses? Yeah,
we do. They're being sold on every corner in Waco, Texas. Last weekend. Yeah. So
I have seen no solar eclipse glass peddlers in Folsom, California. So
you're not going to get the full
terrible
eclipse.
spot.
You're going to get like half of an eclipse.
Just a lame, like whatever. The sun's barely covered. I mean, thing.
For what you're paying for real estate out there, you really should have a full eclipse.
We should have.
You really should. Yeah,
I got to figure out who I need to protest. I gotta send a complaint in somewhere. I don't know. I got to figure that out.
Sure, there's somebody you can complain to. So
and you have the Solar Soccer Club in Dallas too. So that's an interesting. There's got to be something there. I don't know.
That's probably why we're getting. It's probably Solar Soccer Club is so probably prominent. Why. They probably it's part of their franchise, part of their structure. They get that's probably every 50 years or so.
Yes,
it's part of their deal. Yeah.
That's probably true. Yeah, that's probably true. So, I'm just thinking as we're talking about this, and this is actually taking part of away from people's days as they're listening to this, that fortunately we have something that's much better and more important than this conversation of solar eclipses. But it is a big deal. And if you're looking in the prophetic world, there are lots of people saying how because this eclipse is going through Nineveh cities throughout the United States, that it is obviously prophetic of the end of the world. But we're not going to get into that today either. What we do have today is Dave Irby. He is the founder and president of Surge Soccer. He has done all kinds of ministry all over the world over the last couple decades. He was the coach at Azusa Pacific. And, as I'm wearing a Biola shirt, if you're watching the video, they are bitter rivals. But we're not going to get into that because we want to keep it civil today. So, Dave, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I just appreciate the opportunity you've given me. It's so great, Philip, that I got to meet you at the National Soccer Coaches Convention and now meet Paul for the first time.
Well, Dave, I have enjoyed, I've heard so much about you behind the scenes. You not like tons, but I've heard a lot just because you are this, like you were before I met you, the mysterious kind of founder of the Orange County Seahorses program, which is now the SoCal Eagles. And so that's really all I knew about you. So maybe it wasn't a whole lot. Maybe that was an overstatement, but it was all good. And I was like, oh, finally I get to meet Dave. And now as I'm getting to know you more, I'm like, man, this is going to be such a great, fun conversation. But can you, for those of people who don't know you and don't know about you, can you just briefly share your story? How you develop your passion for soccer, how you develop your passion for coaching and ministry and leadership, and how you ended up being one of the pioneers of the soccer ministry movement in our country.
Well, thank you for that question. And I'm one of those people who grew up in an era when soccer was not in the mainstream. What I mean by that is there was no high school soccer, there was no youth soccer, there was no club soccer. There was bits and pieces of pro soccer with leagues coming and going and teams coming and going. And, my recollection of soccer growing up, and I grew up in Anaheim, California, about 10 minutes from Disneyland. My first experience as I was preparing for this interview that I could remember is in 5th grade, my class played my best friend Mike Harvey's class in soccer. Now the girls wore dresses back then. We wore slacks and hard shoes and a dress shirt or a polo shirt. We got at this brown kickball and we were playing 20 on 20. just kicking the ball, having no idea what we were doing. And all of a sudden, the ball hit somebody's arm. And my friend Mike Harvey stopped the game. He started yelling, handball, handball. Well, to show you how much I knew about soccer, I ran over and I said, I put my arm out and said, it hit him here in his arm. How could that be a handball? So you've got a guy who knew nothing about soccer, but church was the main thing with our family. Whenever the door was open, my parents took the 4 Irby boys, John, David, James, and Mark, to church. You kind of don't have to be an Elon Musk or rocket scientist to figure out, where our names came from. And we were avid into sports. It was LA Dodgers. I was a junior Trojan in the Coliseum with the University of Southern California Trojans. My dad made sure we got to a Dodger game, Lakers, lots of Trojan games. And my heroes were football players like Mike Babbitt, defensive back for USC, Maury Wills for the Dodgers, Ron Fairley. I knew nothing about soccer, except I remember one time going to Pop Warner football practice, and there was these older adults in these really short shorts kicking a ball and shouting, sometimes some things I wasn't supposed to say in a different language. It's a thick accent. I'm like, what is this? The interesting thing is I was growing up at Trinity, and some of my stories so weird it's hard to believe, but I'm only going to tell you the true parts, right? As a senior in high school, I walked into our church, Trinity United Presbyterian Church in Santa Ana, and my parents had been commuting from Anaheim, and that was their home church for 56 years till they passed away. They lived in the same home. But there was a poster there that said Azusa Pacific College, small Christian college. And I remember pointing at the poster and saying, I'm going to go there. Well, I went to Cypress College for a year. My girlfriend went there, and I don't know where this idea came from because I'd never played soccer, and I'd never lettered in a varsity sport in high school. In fact, I grew 4 inches after high school and grew into my athletic body. But I said, do you have a soccer team? And she said, we do. Why don't you come meet the captain? And so I drove up to see my girlfriend at the time. And he said, yeah, we have a club team and you'd be welcome. We play teams like Cal State Fullerton. We lose 10-0, but hey, anyone's welcome. So as I got prepared to go to Azusa Pacific, they restarted men's varsity soccer. And I was at the right place at the right time. To explain what type of Christian I was at that time, some of my buddies came with me and we had these pizza buck dollars. We go to Pizza Hut. We look at the cafeteria food, which is way better now, but we go to Pizza Hut. And I guess we were being kind of rowdy because the manager came over and he said, he saw my friend had a logo that said Azusa Pacific College. And he said, did you guys go to Azusa Pacific College? And we said, yes. And he said, well, you guys, really? You're making an awful lot of noise. And my friend just happened to say, well, small Christian college. And he just exclaimed, well, we're small Christians. And that's how I would describe myself. I've grown up Christian faith. I wanted to be a comfort zone Christian, go to church, hang out with Christian friends, but no way I was going to exercise my faith. But now I started playing soccer and I fell in love with the game. I said, this is the best sport I've ever played because everyone could be the quarterback, right? Everyone got to touch the ball. Unlike in baseball, where you go long periods and not touching the ball. And in my senior year, I decided I wanted to be a soccer coach. So I was going to be a history major from the time I was 4 and be a history teacher like my dad. Well, now I changed to physical education, eventually got also a BA in social science. But now I wanted to be a coach. So I went over to Gladstone High School nearby, local high school, and I walked on and they said, you can be the goalkeeper coach. Well, again, this is an era when soccer is barely developing. There were only 2 books written on soccer that I could find. One was a fluff piece. The other one was Vogelsinger's Challenge of Soccer. And every day before practice, I would literally open the book and say, okay, what should we do today? I mean, that's how I started. And then when I graduated from Azusa Pacific, I became the head coach at the age of 23. So now I'm coaching some guys that I played with. And one of the guys was even older than me. But I was all in for soccer then, you guys. My first soccer game I ever saw live was the 1974 World Cup final. And you had to go pay-per-view to the LA Forum to watch the game. And it was Germany versus the Netherlands. And my uncle took me. He'd grown up as a MK in South Korea and played soccer way back in the day at UCLA. And I'm just like, this is just amazing. This is truly amazing. So that really got me on my start into soccer at a late age, 19. And then I just practiced like crazy. And until I became, became a good enough player to be invited to play on a semi-pro team at the end of my playing career. But that launched me into my coaching career.
Yeah, and then you got your A license, which is no small feat. That's a lot of certifications getting to there. Started Surge Soccer, which we're going to get into later, as far as some really amazing stuff that you've been able to do through that. And then started a bunch of different things ministry wise, which I'm looking forward to getting into that part of the conversation. But I think we'll save that for a little bit later and down the road here. But that's awesome. I love hearing how. It's always Paul and I talk about this all the time, just how God uses people and brings people and weaves this story because he knew beforehand, right, that you're going to be making an impact in the world through soccer, and he got you there somehow, right? And so I just love that story. So anyway, I know Paul and I both have a lot of things in our story as well that both of us played soccer much earlier. But still, the idea of, just how these stories are woven, it's always fun to hear.
And I think that just the connections that we all have through the game too. It's funny, that your first reference was a Vogelsinger book. I had overlapped with Vogelsinger young in my career. He'd come out to Georgia and was doing something with the Georgia Youth Soccer Convention, and my team played with him basically while he was doing demonstrations. So, and I walked away with VHS tapes with Vogelsinger's stuff. And anyway, so he was a big impact on the game for sure, and a pioneer in a lot of ways. So it's cool to hear his name brought up time and again. But David, before we get into really a lot of the things that you've done through the sport, tell us, what's your why? Like, why do you do what you do? What's kind of your life purpose?
And I think I would start with a crisis in my life when I was 25. Here I was, a rising star as a college soccer coach, and I was getting some invitations from coaches who were retiring to say, "Hey, I'm going to put you in as my lead candidate to get the job." So the soccer part was going really well, but there was this hole in my heart, and I couldn't fill it with wins. And so I eventually got to the point where I was so despondent with life. I was really questioning. Here I am. I did my master's degree, as you mentioned. Thank you, Phil, for going for my A license, working my way up. But it was all about me. And it was all about, even though I felt that it wasn't all about me, I just did not want to enter the faith zone as a Christian. But I came to that crisis point. I finally threw up my hands and, I was weeping. And I said, "Lord, I believe. Help me to believe. You can straighten out the mess my life is in." And I said these three things that I had said I would never do when I was 12 years old. When I was at church one day, I said, "I'll become a missionary, go to deepest, darkest Africa, and get up in front of people and speak." And the amazing about it is I really had an inferiority complex, and I really didn't have confidence in myself. But the scales began to fall off of my eyes. I began to read the Bible. I began to change my purpose for coaching soccer. And I would say there's three things that go through my heart and my mind every day now that I committed to following Jesus, is that love your neighbor as yourself, don't judge others, and serve others. And you guys know, and everyone that's in soccer that's listening, and many will have a favorite team around the world, that's through the internet and through air travel, anyone in soccer is our neighbor. And that's why I've been able to go into so many different countries, because a soccer ball instantly connects us. I mean, in the airport, I'm always looking, there's somebody wearing a soccer jersey, and you can always strike up a conversation and develop a friendship. "Oh, you're an Arsenal fan. You're a Barcelona fan. How cool." I tell them who I'm for, and they're like, "Oh, too bad, but we could still, hang out and chat." And so I've really seen how soccer connects the world. Soccer connects us with just about every country in the world. And we have a Surge Instagram, and we have people in even Iran and Indonesia and different places that are following us. So my life core is love your neighbor as yourself. Don't judge others, and then serve others. And through soccer, we actually can do that. We can serve others, starting with our players, our own fans, the referees, and into our communities and into the global community.
Yeah, I love that. Marcy and I, my wife, Marcy and I, we talk about that all the time, how you can be just about anywhere and you just roll out a soccer ball and, the walls come down. It doesn't matter if you don't even speak the same language. All of a sudden the game is the language. The game is the great communicator. It's the thing that breaks down the wall or tears down the wall, and we play, right? And we bond over that, and we're able to then figure out that we're all just God's people, and it's been really cool to see that. And you've obviously done that probably many times over through your career, and I want to dive into that with just some of the ministries. So just walk through some of the ministries and things that God's giving you the opportunity to do. I'd love to just hear more about that with, even starting that, seahorses and all of that.
I think, I hope that people, when they finish the conversation, the takeaway will be something that can encourage them in their own life, not what I've done, but that a kid who had never played soccer can go and travel the world as a soccer coach and ambassador for Christ. And that's because I stepped into the faith zone. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. What I realize, he wants to bless us spiritually, not necessarily financially, not necessarily with fame and fortune. And so as I was coaching at Azusa Pacific, how it all began for me, one of my players said, at Easter vacation, we go down to Mexicali, Mexico, and would you like to bring the soccer team? Well, this is where I had that conversation with the Lord. And now I was saying, Lord, I just want to do whatever you want. I had no idea. I didn't have a 5-year plan, a 1-year plan, a 1-day plan. I'm open now. I was living my life and I kept building up disappointment, depression, discouragement. And now I was excited. And I didn't have control of anything in my life as far as that's concerned. So we took the men's soccer team. We played in a men's prison and we played in a boys' prison, and we played on a dirt field covered with broken glass. And on that field with the dirt and the broken glass, our sideline were the people. When the ball hit somebody, you knew it was out of bounds. There's dogs running across the field. And at halftime, we called the people in, and through interpreters, we just shared how much Jesus loves us. He has a plan for us, no matter what our circumstances. And I said, wow, this is amazing. And we went in the boys' prison, and I asked through interpreters why the boys are here. And they said, most of them are here because no one cares about them. So I was open now. My heart was broken, and it's taking us to orphanages and those kind of places now around the world. So the key is take a baby step. And that's what I did. And I didn't know after that what was going to happen, but now I was open. So right before MAI and the Seahorses, I was the first soccer coach for Sports Life Ministries in Tacoma, Washington. We had a full-time soccer team, and that was the next step. And the step after that was then to become the first full-time staff member for Missionary Athletes International. And along the way, of course, I kept coaching. I coached, of course, first at Azusa Pacific University, then at Christ College Irvine, then Concordia Irvine, Corbin University in Salem, but also club, in high school. I was one of those guys trying to make ends meet, living as a faith, soccer coach, raising support, and then coaching part-time. But what's happened is the Lord has given us amazing opportunities to go to Uganda after Idi Amin had destroyed the country through the Civil War. And we took a team, the Seahorse team, and we played a series of matches preaching reconciliation through Christ. And I don't really know what we did. I'll know when we get to heaven, but we were obedient. And now instead of running from God and having fear control my life, it's like, let's go to the hardest places we can go. And we played those matches, and we visited the schools, and we visited schools where Idi Amin's soldiers had lined up the school children and then shot a few of them just to keep fear running rampant throughout the country. The complete opposite of what we believe, the love of God. We saw how when we played those matches under armed guard, the people came out and they wanted to meet us, and they wanted to hear the message, and they wanted hope. And then, from there, we've continued that journey. The next time was Sudan, of all places, during the longest running, many other trips to other places, but I've just given you a few that highlights, hopefully quickly. But the president of Sudan invited us to bring a Christian soccer team to play the national team. And this is during the longest ongoing civil war in African history at that point. Osama bin Laden had been living in Khartoum where we were going to play. He was gone now. But and you know how guys are. We were talking before the broadcast. I was saying, well, I can say something that I think's funny and my sons will laugh. My daughter and my wife will roll their eyes. They don't think I'm funny, but we were guys being guys. We had to write goodbye letters while we were in Mozambique to our loved ones in case we didn't return. And any of us that wanted to opt out of the trip then could opt out. And none of the guys did. But we wrote those goodbye letters and we wept. I wept. I had to keep turning away as the tears flowed, realizing that I might leave my parents, my brothers, my wife, and my 3 kids behind. And my wife knew that when she took me to the airport that day and we said goodbye. But I had gone from running from Christ to wanting to serve him in whatever way possible. But back to the guys, we're on the plane flying into Sudan, and we're joking. I wonder how they're going to take us out. You think of a bazooka as we land, or, we're coming up with all these crazy ideas. Well, we had their secret police guarding us the whole time. They're on our floors at night. They cleared every road as we traveled for fear of bombs. And our biggest scare one time, we heard this crackling sound when we were on the bus. And we all hit the floor. We thought it was over. And our bus had just scraped the tree and the branches had snapped off. But we went into that national stadium with 10,000 spectators. We drew 1-1 with a team of players from all over the world, literally. American players, but other players. And they had broadcast the game all over Sudanese TV around the world, even into Southern California. And at halftime, the reporter said, I'm going to ask a question that everyone's going to hear. I may never be heard from again, but I want you to share why you're here. And one of our players shared that Christ brings us together. Christ can bring reconciliation. Christ can bring hope. So, of course, on to Burundi for civil war prevention, if you have time for that. And then the refugee ministry that we did in Austria, when refugees flooded, and there were a couple more of the highlights of how I went from running from life, controlled by fear, by having faith to go forward a step at a time, a day at a time, to see how I could serve, not knowing when or where or how we would put a team together. We used to have our Surge team here, and then, of course, the Seahorse team, but we disbanded our Surge team so we could move quickly and more rapidly to troubled spots.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. For sharing all that. A couple of things that stand out there's a lot that stands out to me in what you're sharing. It's just really, really amazing and impactful. But a couple of things I want to circle back to. You said kind of at the beginning, one thing you said is it started with a baby step, right? And I think sometimes we can get locked up in anything we're doing, whether it's service or it's coaching or what our next step is in life, and trusting God with those things. And sometimes you're right. It's just, what's that first little baby step that you have to take? You have to initiate something, right? You can sit and pray all day, but if you don't take some kind of a step, you're not really allowing God to work through you. And so I want to point that out, the baby step piece. And then I love what you said too. I don't know if you even know if you said it or not, but earlier you said, I'm not even sure what we did. Maybe we'll find out when we get to heaven. I think that's a very powerful statement, because I think sometimes we want to know the result of what we're doing. We want to know, what's the immediate impact? What did we do? Sometimes people ask, hey, what did you do? What happened? What was the impact? What was it? And I think there's so much value in what you said. There's we may not know till we get to heaven. But if we're doing it because we want to know what the impact is, I think we're doing it for the wrong reason. Would you agree with that? Take me through that, because I think that's a really important thing. Is we talk about people in service, is that, when you support people in service, hey, we're just going to do what God's calling us to do. Let God take care of the result or the impact. Maybe talk a little bit about that through your ministry and your perspective of being in service.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I'm talking to coaches here, right? We're coaches. We organize, we control. Where if players were late to practice, we're only late to practice once because the way I had it set up, they had to go do something that they never wanted to do again. We want to control everything. We want to control outcomes. That's how we are. We're trained in our American society to control outcomes and how many notches did you get on your Bible, or how many, what are your statistics? And I just felt like as I dive more and more into the scriptures, that just wasn't what I was supposed to do. In fact, some of the guys I worked with said, we have to have a 5-year plan. You know what? I'm not against a 5-year plan, as long as we say, if the Lord wills, we'll do this, this, and this. But what I learned through this is God doesn't, he's controlling the outcome. He's in charge. And the more I remember that I'm not in charge, the more successful I believe I can be. One of my good friends, Simon Gilbow, he has a daily devotion. He moved from England to Burundi to die for Christ during the Civil War. And he has this one story about this businessman who comes to Calcutta to meet with Mother Teresa, to find himself, kind of thing. And he says something to her about, you have clarity. And she goes, clarity? I don't have clarity. I just have faith in Christ, And so I might have gotten distracted. I hope I answered your question, but it's just about, there's things that we don't and we can't control. And we need to just trust God for. We've trusted God for our finances. I mean, when my wife and I married, well, she had stars in her eyes. I was 31. She was 23 and a half. Here I have my master's degree and my A license, and I'm earning $500 a month on base support. My marital advice is don't marry anyone like me. But she took that chance, and we've been together 40 years. We got 3 wonderful kids, and we have three grandkids. But more of us need to realize we just have to go forward in faith. Sure, we have plans. Sure, we have visions. You have visions. We have visions. You have visions for our family. I have vision for my grandkids. And even though my 6-year-old grandson is named Beckham, I did not name him. Everybody thinks I named him, but I didn't. And I don't care if he plays soccer or baseball. In fact, I told my son, don't have him play soccer. Way too much pressure for a kid with the first name of Beckham.
That's right. It's funny you say that. I've heard several kids with Beckham. You hear Beckham, on the soccer fields, those little 6-year-olds. I'm like, poor kid, man. They're just like, so, like you said, there's so much pressure on them to play this sport that they might not even like, But I think you said something there I've talked with so many people about, like, and Paul, I'm glad you pointed that out, that idea of, I've joked with people, but it's half joking because it's true that there's so many whiteboards that I have drawn up over the years of the 5-year, 10-year master plan that we're going to do. And I wish I would have taken pictures of all of them and shown how little of that actually came to fruition. And yet it wasn't failure, right? It was exactly where God was leading. And now what I'm saying to people is, look, go to the next breadcrumb. It's okay to have this 5-year plan, but go to the next breadcrumb that God puts down for you and say, I'm going to be faithful in that next step to that next thing. And then he's going to place that other one, and to trust that, yeah, we have these, we will make our plans, but the Lord will direct our steps, right? Like that idea of, we need to have that, and to trust God with the results, like you said. And I'd love to just sit here and I hope we have another opportunity to talk with you about all the details about all these different things, because I'm like, well, what happened in Uganda? What happened in Burundi? What happening with these things? And I know you only know a handful of that, because both Paul and I too, we've done these trips, and we know that you only see just a little glimpse, and God gives you just enough to be encouraged when we need the encouragement. But the reality is we don't need to know. It's not for us to know, really. It's for us to be faithful. And God will give us some gifts to be able to know some of that. But one of the other things that you've done is you've written this book, and I have the blur on, so it's this Undefeated book. You've written a couple other books, which we'll get into in a minute. But I just want to talk this. This is called Undefeated. We are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Right? And I wrote a book. Writing a book is not the easiest thing in the world. Even this is a little short book, but I know that this little short book had a lot of blood, sweat, and tears put into them. So why did you write the book, and how do you hope it will impact the readers?
Thanks for bringing it up. And it's really a cool story. Tim Conrad was a coach at Biola University when I was a coach at Azusa Pacific. And on the sideline of our game, I knew he'd taken a team overseas on a soccer mission trip, and now it was ready. So I said, next year, if you decide to take a team. And I said, I'll go as a water boy. It doesn't matter. I'm ready to serve. Well, it ended up I was a head coach of a really tremendous all-star team of players. We did a 33-day tour in Jordan, Austria, West Germany, and the Netherlands. But he came back a few years ago, and it's a different ministry he founded, Uncharted Waters, and he asked 5 of us soccer coaches to each write 4 devotionals. So there's actually 20 of these that are in print, and he did give me permission to have them all. But the reason I in the Undefeated, only put in the 4 that I wrote is because this was around 2017 and refugees were flooding into Europe from Afghanistan, Middle East. I mean, you name it. And at one time in Vienna, we had 11 Christian soccer players who graduated from different universities, living in Vienna and playing on Austrian teams and doing ministry. By the time the refugees came flooding in by trains, one of them was still there, and he'd go meet the trains. And these refugees, they spoke Arabic, they spoke Farsi. And so, try to keep the story short, but one of his friends who had played baseball saw the impact of soccer ministry. He moved to Salzburg because he wanted to do some kind of ministry, and he was a barista at Starbucks right at that point. But his small church there, and all evangelical churches in Austria are small, but they decided we're going to have a 24-hour fast and prayer time to see how we should help the refugees. After 24 hours, they came back, and a lady in the church who had no interest in soccer said, well, I was praying, I saw a soccer ball. Well, Danny, who was that friend, said, I've got to get a hold of Dave Irby. So he said, I don't care when you come back to Vienna, I'll get on the train and I'll come meet you. I did this crazy trip to Burundi, to Salzburg, to Manchester United game with the chaplain who's a friend of mine of their team. And so I did this crazy trip, and he said, Dave, we need to start soccer ministry. We have all these refugees here. And so for the next 3 or 4 years, I went to Salzburg repeatedly. We organized soccer leagues, we organized soccer teams. Some of the refugees even came to dinners at the church. And what we realized is most of them, they're not really going to want to take a Bible if we give it to them, even though they believe in Jesus. But they were open now because their lives had been destroyed. So that's what led me to put the 4 stories I wrote into this book form. And as you showed the cover of Mineiro, the famous Brazilian player, he went to Burundi with us on that mission trip. But I put those 4 stories, and we had people translate them. So this particular one that you mentioned, it's in English, German, Arabic, and Farsi. So after a big soccer tournament that we had, we autographed and we handed these out to the players so they could read these stories in their own language. And they would read inspirational stories in here, about the Manchester United plane crash and then later what happened and the other ones that are in there. Just the 4 right now. But so something that we'd say, here's a gift and it's in your language.
Yeah, it's really cool what you do there too. And I just want you to real quickly you just use the Edmilson one story, but you take the story and it's like a 2-3 page story that then leads to a biblical, how it portrays biblical truths, right? And so, there's Edmilson, then you then juxtapose it with Peter's story and Peter's life. Can you just quickly tell that, I hope people get this book because it is cool. I'd also, all those translations are in this one copy, right? So you don't have to go, oh, I need to go get the Farsi copy, or I need to go get whatever copy. And I'm sitting here in Folsom, California, where we have locally all these different populations. It's so cool to be able to say, hey, here's a book, and just there you go. So can you just kind of share that real quickly? What
Sure.
people will get if they're reading this?
Yeah, sure. And also there's one that's just English Spanish, because we have so many people who speak Spanish. Well, I'm from Southern California, so I know, and even here in Oregon. But yeah, the idea is just to take a famous player. I mean, we watch the World Cup. We look at these players and we don't know their story. And here's Edmilson at 11 years old. He'd given up on life on the weekends. And a few years later, he just turned to drinking. And he allowed external pressures from poverty, growing up in poverty, to destroy him from the inside. But while he was doing that, he was still going to the soccer club, and his soccer club had a Bible study. And one day he decided to go, and he heard how Jesus Christ could change his life. So his story is about what we all experience. We all have external pressures. And some people turn to alcohol, like Ed Mielson. Others turn to drugs, whatever it might be. It's a story that's relatable because we have external pressures. And he showed how he handled it and how he despondent and discouraged in that Bible study and learning about Jesus' love, and then changed his life. And then, of course, as you mentioned, it's coupled with a Bible study or about Peter. We think of St. Peter. We think of Peter, the rock. But what did he do when he was threatened externally? Weren't you one of his disciples? And he denied Christ 3 times. And so he allowed, the external pressure, and he became destroyed on the inside. But the amazing part about that, and I know we'll talk more about my coaching philosophy, but it's helped me in the way I coach players. You think about Peter, how many greater failures are there than that? And then what did Jesus say to him? Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. He didn't yell at him. He didn't scream at him. The goalie lets the goal in. What does the coach do? He screams at him from the sideline. Here's one of the greatest failures, and Jesus showed him love. And of course, I forgot to mention with Ed Mielson, he went on then to become, a famous national team player for Brazil in the World Cup. And I'm not saying everyone that's the answer. We're going to become rich, famous, successful, but we're going to have that internal piece. And it infected Ed Mielson. And then Peter went out and, went crazy for Jesus and shared Christ to the end of his death, which is, most people think it was pretty torturous.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it's a really cool thing. And is this book on Amazon? How are you able to get the book?
Yeah, thanks. And so all 3 of the books that I have written are on Amazon, this one, and then the sports ministry textbook and the children's book as well. That can be got, they're on Amazon.
Yeah. Thanks. And so, like you said, you have a kid's book. It's called Sammy Surge, and it's about lessons for kids. Sports ministry book. We'll have all the links to all those on the show notes for this, so you can definitely check those out, folks. And I strongly encourage you. They're easy, they're simple. I mean, I sat down and read this book in probably half hour, maybe an hour. But it was a quick read. But then it's also something you can pour into and actually be something to study with Bible studies as well. If you're doing sports ministry, if you're doing things and you're looking for tools for your teams, whether it's a youth team, college team, high school team, whatever, to be able to go through these would be just really solid materials and simple, but they're also bringing in the sports world too. So definitely recommend you checking that out.
Thank you.
Yeah. And David, you led into it there a minute ago. I want to dive talked about, coaching philosophy, and, let's dive into that a little bit. I'd love to hear, how you incorporated your faith into your coaching specifically, and, how it impacts team culture and those sorts of things. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Thank you. I think, as I was growing in Christ, I asked myself, what should my teams look like, whether it's a Christian team, like it is a Pacific University, or I'm coaching in a secular setting, like one of the soccer clubs or a high school. And I realized, first of all, with the Christian teams, I didn't see a whole lot of testimony often from the teams we played against. Sometimes the Christian teams were some of the worst sports. And I said, so as I would tell my more recent teams when I coached at Corbin, it's easy to be a Christian when you're sitting in chapel or church, where we find out whether we're truly following Christ is in the heat of the battle. And for us, the heat of the battle is on the soccer field. And so my admonition to my teams before every game, whatever team it was, I said, we should play to win the game and to win the fair play award. People should say there's something different about that team. And that was forged in many ways. I can remember going to a 11-year-old girls' youth soccer team, when the ball went out of bounds, 5 players ran over, threw their arms up and screamed, "Our ball," even when it clearly wasn't. And I said, I don't think that's what I, as a Christian, should be teaching. I don't think I should be teaching fake diving, or this gamesmanship that we see. I don't see where we have a testimony. And so to me, fair play. And with our mascot, Sammy Surge, on our website and in this book, there's a little chapter on that. And so for me, we give everything, no matter what the score is, right? But it should be about respect for the game, the other team, the referees, as well. And when I would tell people that, hey, my team won the Fair Play Award, I'm not kidding y'all. Without fail, they'd say, "Oh, so you finished last?" No, no. Our semi-pro, the Seahorses, when he first started, and I helped develop a league, and we played against Rod Stewart, the rock singer. At 16, he made a decision to go into music, which was brilliant, but he still loves soccer. So his team, the Exiles, is one of the teams we played against. And I said, guys, when we play against these guys, our testimony has to be, they have to see something different in us. And so a really cool side note is when Rod's father, Jock, passed away, he had so much respect for our Seahorse team that before our game with him, he had us gather around the center circle with his team. And they brought in a guy in the with the bagpipe and the kilts and play a lament to his father. So we felt really, really honored in that we were making a difference. The year we finished second to them and we didn't receive a yellow or red card. And so, I just think that's an important part. Teaching discipline, teaching life skills. We only have these kids for so long. And of course, in the countries we go to now, like Liberia, if there's a fatherless generation, who are they going to look up to? They're looking up to us. And are we just teaching them by yelling and screaming at them? And that's the way of life. And when you lose, you're a total failure. Or are there lessons we can learn? And even in the toughest defeat, if the team honestly gave their all as a Christian, can I not say, yes, guys, thank you for giving everything that you could. It just wasn't meant to be for today, but tomorrow's coming.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that when we talk about, the impact we have as coaches, and I think that's something that a lot of coaches miss. And you said that we only have these kids for a certain amount of time, whatever that certain amount of time is. And to have that eternal perspective as we're coaching rather than this temporal perspective that we typically have, which is this year, we got to win. If we don't win this championship, it's going to be the end of the world. It's like, no, it's not. It's not going to be. Life will go on. And if you win the championship, life goes on. And if that is the end and everything is that's the apex of your life, I feel sorry for you. Like that's sad if the apex of your life is winning a championship at any level, quite frankly, because that's going to burn. I mean, at the end of the day, like that is not, you can't take it with you. All these things that we hear about, like what is the legacy? And so as coaches, I remember talking with the coach that I coached high school with, and he said, we just get these kids for 3 months and we get who we get and we do what we do and we try to win games. We try to get them to play together and then it's done. And I'm like, no, we get them for 3 months. I think you're missing it. Look at it from this side. We get them for 3 months. We probably see them more than their parents see them. Quality time. So how can we impact lives at levels that will change something about the way they see the world, about the way they lead, about the way they can have that integrity when no one's watching, when they know it's, and there's only certain things you can do. If the ref calls a foul, you can't, argue with the ref to say, no, I didn't, or they didn't foul me or something like that. That's not how it works. But there are certain ways you can, teach those lessons. So anyway, and I'm not saying, and I think I heard it with you too. It's like, we're not saying don't try to win. Don't try to do that. That's all part of it, right? Do your best. Do the best you can. All of that will be giving your all. So, loved how you said that. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, thanks. And as you were sharing that with one of the last soccer clubs I was in charge of, we had a rule in the club that if you got a red card, that you, your family, whatever, donated $25 to the scholarship fund, and you did 4 hours of community service. I didn't know how people would respond. People absolutely loved it. Parents loved it. And parents say, "Thank you. My son thinks this is the most amazing thing he's done." And I would say, "Well, don't get more red cards to do it." But, I would tell my last main youth soccer gig was a youth team with the LA Galaxy in Orange County. My wife stayed here in Salem. I lived down there and coached the Seahorses first, came back, a few years ago, and then coached with the Galaxy. But I would tell them that, we don't want to get yellow and red cards because we have to sit out of games. And Spain is a great example of sportsmanship. When we think about it, they didn't finish last in 2010 World Cup. They won the World Cup and they won the Fair Play Award. Practically speaking, it means your key players are not sitting out of games if you have that type of discipline.
All right. So let's kind of go to the, you did have a short playing career, but what was there a defining moment in your playing career that you learned a lesson about life? And if so, what was it? Why was it so impactful? And how are you using that lesson in your life afterwards?
So wait a minute. I had a really long playing career. In fact, up until 2 years ago, I was still playing in the over 60 charity match.
Okay, that's true. Okay, I stand corrected. And and you've played all over the world. What am I talking about? You played, let's say semi-pro, because it's not pro,
Yes.
but you're playing, yeah. No, yeah. Yes. Okay, I stand corrected. I apologize.
No, you're true. I did try out for a couple of pro teams after my college career, and they were open tryouts. Okay. I didn't get invited to any. And when I walked away from the second one, I said, yeah, I think coaching's in my future. And I would say, at Azusa Pacific, I was the engine room guy. I started every game of my 4 years, except for one game when I was injured. But I was the kind of guy there or later when I played, I didn't get paid playing semi-pro. Seriously. I mean, I was happy to play, but some guys did. But shoot, I just had what happened? Oh, playing career. Yeah. I was the guy, if I wasn't in the game, the coach might go, something's missing, but he never thought it was me, even though it might have been, So one of my claims to fame as a player, and then I'll weave it into a question you asked, is at 21, I went for my national C license. And as Paul has already mentioned, we both grew up learning from Vogelsinger's A Challenge of Soccer. My first college coach, who I loved dearly, he said, I haven't coached that much. I don't know that much about soccer, but we're going to learn and grow together. I'd have gone through a brick wall for him, but I didn't learn much about soccer playing. And then I went to the C license and was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I mean, all these things that I'm learning about soccer and from these great minds. And, to get your license, I don't know how it is then, but you had to play and prove that you could play. Now you think about it, football coaches, you don't go to a football seminar and put on the pads, right? For baseball, it'll make you, okay, can you hit 2 out of 3? No. For basketball, they make you go play. I don't think so. I never went to one. But so here we are with all these, top coaches across the country sitting there. You have the C's versus the B licenses, the B versus the A, and the A versus the C. And again, I was that guy. I never made all league or anything in college. Well, I scored the only goal of the 3 games, and I was at the top of the 18. A cross came in, and I left-footed volleyed it out of the air into the back of the net, and everybody fell down. And it was amazing. And for me, why it was amazing is it's because it's within us to do great things. I'm saying that's not great like scoring a World Cup goal, but the power is within us. In Ephesians 3:20, now unto him who's able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond whatever we hope or ask, according to the power that works within us. And each of us is made to, in some way, whether it's just doing a great job working with orphans or coaching high school soccer, but each of us, there's that power. And scoring that goal reminded me, wow, I'm never going to be mentioned as a great soccer player or a great soccer coach, but I got to have that great moment to remind me that every one of us can have great moments, whatever it is to be.
That's great. I love that. And I think you, as a coach, you've impacted obviously a ton of a ton of players and people through your career as a coach. Was there a coach that stood out to you that was a major impact on you that you look back now and go, okay, that's kind of why I am, or in how I do things? Was there a coach that stands out to you?
And I mentioned my first coach, and of course he was inspirational, but I didn't. And again, as Philip rightly said, I didn't really have a long career as a real player, and that's so true. And there's just a reminder again that God can use anyone, even the guy who wasn't, a famous soccer player. The ones that really impacted me, in I would just say briefly, when I went for my B license, Othar Oziander, who had he was a waiter and he was our national team coach, eventually coached the LA Galaxy, but just the spirit he brought to teaching us. The other one in that same was Jay Hoffman. And I have to say, sadly, even at the national coaching schools, there were some coaches who really weren't, I'm not sure why they were there, or, they didn't seem to have the motivation, kind of seemed burned out, but not Jay Hoffman. Much as he coached, he brought his game. When he came to teach us at the A refresher courses I went to, he brought his A game. But I think who really also impacted me was Franz Hoek. And I only was with him briefly. And Franz Hoek, for those who don't know him, has been the goalkeeper assistant coach to Louis van Gaal at Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Manchester United. But when I met him, he was with Van Gaal at Ajax. And that was 1995. They'd won the Dutch championship, the European championship. Then they went to Japan and beat the Brazilian team to win the world championship. So they came down to Southern California on holiday. And I got asked, because I'd taken youth teams to Holland. And of course they were at Holland and Netherlands. And the organizer of those tournaments knew Franz, Louis, and all of them, and said, will you set up a soccer seminar for them at your university campus, which was Concordia, or I don't know if it was Christ College. And so I did. But the thing was, I did a really bad job and I didn't get very many players there. Here we had these famous coaches, but still, we were still developing in soccer then. And so one of the things I learned from Franz is a second chance. They gave me a second chance the next year to do it again. They didn't have to do anything with me. They could have just said, you were terrible and go away. But I got a second chance, and I believe that helped me in my coaching. You want to give players a second chance as well. But the other thing, a couple things he taught me, is he said they did everything together as a team when they were at Ajax. And I don't mean they lived together, but they went golfing together. They went to the movies together. And it just really made me realize the importance of, it's kind of like community in the Christian church, right? Where we have small groups so you can get to know people. But he taught me that how important that was. And the third lesson he taught me is that everyone's important. I was getting ready to go see the derby, Manchester City, Manchester United, because my good friend John Boyer is a chaplain for Manchester United. He said, hey, if you can get here, I got a ticket for you. So, and Franz through social media saw I was coming. He said, hey, I want to meet with you. He doesn't need to meet with Dave Irby. Franz is here. I'm here. And so the Man U team's at the Lowry Hotel, the night before the game. And Franz says, when the meetings are done, I'll come and meet you for coffee. He didn't need to spend time with me. And it just reminds, it's another lesson, the same one that Jesus teaches us. Everyone's valuable. Everyone's important. And we can make a difference in our players' lives, the fans' lives, the referees' lives, in the community. And so those were really, just snippets of the coaches who impacted me, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, that's so valuable. Just that time, right? It's time invested. It's community. It's culture. I love all that.
Yeah, so do I. I love that, and I also am going to have you connect me with Manchester United chaplain when I go over there. So, I mean, that's just a side note, but we'll have that conversation
we'll talk later
off the air. Yeah, exactly. On a different note, you have been part of this beautiful game for a long, long time. You played, you coached, you've gone around the world doing different things. But I just want to kind of take a step back, and we have a few more questions that we want to finish up with. But this one is one we ask a lot of different people: is what have you seen over the years as far as the trajectory of U.S. soccer? What are the good and the bad that you've seen at the youth level, college level, whatever it may be, and what are the things you like, and what are things you might want to go back to the way it used to be, or change and go a different direction.
Well, I thank you for giving me the questions ahead of time. I definitely wrestled over this one and whether I had a good answer, because I have in the U.S. now. I'm not in the game here. My game's in Liberia and my heart's in Liberia.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to go back again to train coaches and work in education and trauma relief. So I think that.
Well, then let me change the question. I'm curious.
Yeah.
What would you say you've seen in Liberia that you really like that you'd like to see here in the U.S.?
Okay, well,
unless you had an answer for the other one, because you thought about that. So you go. I'm just mixing it up on you. So but I do want to hear the answer.
You are. Maybe I can briefly answer both. But the part that bothers me the most. Well, first of all, our game has grown, and I hear people debating about the MLS. It's not good. It's not that. And I'm happy we have an MLS. I grew up in an era, literally. I think LA was a graveyard of soccer teams. The LA Skyhawks, you root for this other team, and they would disappear. The leagues would disappear. North American Soccer League. I got to see play. I got to see the greats like Johan Cruyff and Trevor Francis, all those guys. But the leagues disappeared. So I'm thankful for the Major League Soccer that we have it, and we have a stable league. It also helps, I think, to lead to some stability in the youth. What really galls me, and I don't want to say which club I was with when I did it, but it was we need the players to pay money. And I hate that system compared to the European system. I saw with the one club, the single parent who's working 2 jobs just wants to get their club, their son into this club, even though I'm not coaching. I'm coaching the second or third tier at that club, because it's a famous name, and if my son just gets into the club, they'll become professional. And I feel like we're giving sometimes people false hopes instead of being realistic. So when I coached my high school teams and my club teams, I said to the parents in their first meeting, I'm sorry if you're here because you think I'm going to help get your son, because I coach mostly boys, son a college scholarship. My goal is to make them love the game, be lifetime fans of soccer, and give back to the game. And I'm going to have them play positions that you don't think they should be playing, because with the club team, when they get to high school and the coach says, I need a left back, your son's going to be able to say, I did play left back. I could play there, because every parent thought their kid was the best forward. So I struggle with the pay for play part. I don't have an answer for it, but I'm grateful for how, through all the mistakes, our youth soccer has developed. Now with Liberia, it's the 7th poorest country in the world. And a good friend of mine, too long of a story to tell here, but he fled during one of the civil wars, and he got to the U.S. He just went back now as a technical director. And so we're going to be doing some good things, I believe, to train coaches and train them at whole life coaching and getting their kids, into the education system. So the good thing is they're just wonderful people. In fact, they're ranked number 1 on the World Index out of millions of surveys of people who are the most generous. A country that's been through 2 civil wars, the Ebola crisis. The average person lives on $1.27 or something a day, but they would give you the shirt off their back. So they're very giving. And now the Lord has me being able to help educate and teach and train, and they're so open. And, I think here sometimes there's so much fighting about, this method and that method. There's lots of different methods that work. When we coach, we each have to find the one that works for us, hopefully putting the players first. But, I just see in debates about so many different things, I shut it all out.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. And we have had the second, folks, if you remember, George Blameau is from Liberia, and we had him on the show a long time ago.
A good friend,
long time ago. Yeah. So, and the whole life coaching that you talked about, we talked about that on that show as well. So, folks, go back and listen. That's a good reminder. Go back and listen. We got a lot of great things in this show, way back in the annals of it. So, Yeah, love that conversation. I actually was able to connect with George at a conference in Houston, unbeknownst to both of us. We both showed up at this event together right after the interview. It was great. So, anyway, I love the small world we are in, and I look forward to seeing how we can actually do some of this cool work together here in the future.
Well, David, we've got a couple of questions we ask everybody on the show as we kind of come down to the end here. It's been an awesome conversation. Just loved hearing the journey that God has you on and has had you on, and I've learned so much just through your story, and been encouraged by it also. So thank you for your time on here. But one of the questions we love to ask everybody is, how have you used some of the lessons you've learned directly from soccer in marriage and parenting and even grandparenting now? As you said, you have a couple of grandchildren.
Yeah, that's really a good question. And I think the first lesson I learned as a young coach, we all want to climb the ladder. Even though I started playing late, because I was fortunate to do a good job at Azusa Pacific, these other opportunities came. One was in New York, one was another really famous small college soccer university in California. And then I even dreamed, maybe I could coach professional. But the first lesson I learned that helped me in my marriage was I looked at some of the coaches I looked up to, because, we all coach at so many different levels. Even a guy who coached professionally might be out at the club soccer match. And I looked at a couple of these guys that I looked up to as coaches, and what I saw in their eyes was a hollowed out look. And as I learned more soccer, they're chasing a professional soccer and getting fired, rehired, and moving around. It really damaged their families. And even one who I had a lot of respect for, the buzz going around was that his son hated soccer. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it had an impact on me. So when I got the chance to move to Oregon to coach the Cascade Surge in the old PDL league, the one the Seahorses are in now, the D2, I took it because my kids were little. My wife was the one who wanted to move. But I said in my heart after that, as long as my kids are home, I'll never move and pursue another coaching job unless my whole family's on board, because I saw, and kids survive that stuff. But for me, it was just, I felt I didn't want to take the chance on that damage. So that was one way. The other one, sadly, that I didn't do as well is because, I was kind of like many coaches. Now we're coaching high school or college, we're coaching club, we're doing all these things to make ends meet. And sometimes we come home and we're shattered. And so there were too many times, unfortunately, when I was just kind of hollowed out myself or worn out, and I didn't give as much attention to my kid. But the way I coached my teams about making the kids lifetime fans of soccer translated to my own sons. And Phil, we're going to talk later about Manchester United, but my son's oldest son, Nathan, in San Diego, with our 3 grandkids, my son, Ryan, he's now in grad school for architecture at University of Texas at Austin. We have our own Manchester United thread. And that's where we talk soccer. Now, we don't talk about how soccer explains leadership, but we talk soccer and this and that. Why did we do that and other teams? And so I'm thrilled that I didn't let my coaching career do extensive damage to my family, and I'm in good stead with all my kids. And my sons absolutely love soccer. My oldest son, Nathan, he now is coaching his son, Beckham, and having a blast. My daughter at age 5, Haley, she plays soccer, and this is so hilarious. After her last game, she looked up at me and she said, "Daddy, I'm retiring from soccer." and she did. But the thing I made sure of, I'm traveling all over the world and doing all this, but I made sure I was at as many of their events as I could be, because I saw these other coaches that were on their free time were golfing. I have nothing against golfing, except I'm really terrible at it, but I didn't want to take that time away. So I was at all, I was the parent, because my wife worked as a nurse, but often I was at her events. So I learned again that negative lesson. I saw coaches, well-meaning, good coaches, good people, but sometimes soccer would just completely took over their lives. So I balanced it fairly well. And my kids knew that I love them. They know I love them. When I call up Nathan, he's our firstborn. I say, "Oh, how's my number one son in the world?" I call Ryan, how's my favorite number two son in the world? Because he's our second son. For my daughter, it's always, how's my favorite daughter? She's my only daughter. And we've had some great experiences because of soccer, going to youth tournaments, traveling. Nathan's been to Africa as a kid. They've been to youth tournaments in Europe. So I did learn some lessons from other coaches that helped me, I think, be a better parent than I might have been.
Well, hopefully we've all learned some of those lessons that have helped us in our marriage and parenting. We've talked a lot about some really great ones over the course of the show. The last question we'd like to ask everybody is, what have you watched, read, or listened to that has most impacted your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership?
So this is the one I wrestled with the most, but my great answer is, I'm late in life to this, but you guys having your podcast and asking me to be on it has really made me think about it. I listened to the whole interview with Shellis, and I was like, wow, I get to see one of the greats who was also, along with Jay Hoffman and Oziander, was part of those, the U.S. national coaching staff that trained us. And you've really stimulated my thinking. And what you've also done is made me realize is I went through all the coaching schools, and I don't remember much talk about leadership. I remember talking about X's and O's and man-to-man marking, like Paul used so well at Baylor, and I used in my early coaching. We were taught to use man-to-man marking with the sweeper, all that kind of stuff. I don't remember the leadership stuff, but my focus with the coaches in Liberia is on leadership. And you made me think that through again, is about how we truly are leaders, and that you help encourage me that I've been on the right path with whole life coaching and placing, player and the player's development over screaming about winning or screaming every time a player makes a mistake. That you can actually use Christ and Christian principles and servant leadership in our coaching, and people will, they will respond when we do that. So most of my leadership books are not soccer related. The Leadership Secrets of Billy Graham, which many people don't know that much, but one of the key principles is building the team. You guys are a team. I like your email to me, Phil, about being teammates, or being part. We're part of the team to build better soccer players, better coaches, and better leaders too, right? This all, as you said, this all translates not just into soccer, but it all translates into life.
Yeah, I love that. And I was thinking maybe your thread with the boys needs to include soccer and leadership now. So just throwing it out there for you. But and I appreciate that. That's so encouraging. And I'm assuming I can speak for Paul in saying that's very encouraging to both of us, because we love doing this selfishly. Like, we just love having these conversations, like learning a ton from guys like you and Shellis and others, so many others, George, who we talked about earlier. I mean, every episode, like, we're taking stuff from them, and it's amazing. And so we're hoping that other people like yourself are learning as well, right alongside, because, it'd be worth it for me just to have these conversations. But what really excites me is how God uses these conversations to help others, right? And that's, I know, what you're doing with the work that you're doing around the world as well. And so to be able to go deep with people, so that others can learn from that, and also get people thinking. What I love hearing from guests too is, I've really never thought about this stuff this way, and to be able to even encourage the coaches that we're coaching to be able to think about these deeper, so that they can incorporate that into the coaching that they're doing as well. So anyway, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for taking the time for this conversation. Thank you for all that you're doing around the world. I mean, we just scratched the surface of so many of the things you're doing. And I mean, even as you're like, yeah, we're kind of doing civil war prevention in Burundi if we have time. Like, I mean, that's like a whole episode in itself, no doubt, of that whole conversation. So I look forward to sitting down with you, sharing a meal someday, and being able to talk about more of this stuff and how we can do stuff together. So thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you guys. And we haven't scratched the surface with Philip, what we were doing with orphans as well, which is near and dear to my heart. But, I appreciate you guys giving me this opportunity. And I'm grateful. My goal is every day to learn, just keep learning, be a lifetime learner. That's it. I don't have a bucket list of places. Of course, I've been everywhere. No, not really, but I've been, I always want to get back to Austria. I love Austria. It's my favorite place to go. But I just want to keep learning and growing and be a good grandpa.
No kidding. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, folks, for being a part of the show. Thank you for engaging the conversation, and hopefully you're taking this stuff and using it in your life. If you want to learn more about Warrior Way, Paul is sporting the Warrior Way shirt and hat today. So if you want to learn more about that, you can. We'll have that on the show notes as well, along with all the other things we talked about throughout the day today. If you want to learn more about coaching the bigger game or Providence World, that Dave had mentioned a little bit about the work we're doing with orphan and vulnerable kids around the world, you can check that out the show notes as well. But as always, folks, we hope that you're taking what you're learning from this show and you're using it to be a better coach, a better player, a better parent, a better spouse, better leader, better in all that you do, and continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.